everyone, and a very warm welcome to this exclusive mega panel discussion on the topic Decoding Talent Economy through the lens of hyper-personalized EX. In this insightful discussion, we'll be focusing on the changing relevance of talent from jobs to skills, the growing need of personalized learning to career paths, and the coming together of multiple talent touchpoints and experience systems towards an integrated talent OS. And with great pleasure, I would like to introduce and invite our speakers for this panel. First up, we have with us Kunal Wadhwani, Group Head HR GCC Choitrams. Kunal has 20 plus years of expertise in HR management for large and medium enterprises, including regional operations. He has a track record of building HR functions and teams from ground up, leading to an organization for 4,500 plus employees and bolstering retention, engagement, and performance. He is a strategic thinker and thought leader who influences and advises leaders as a business partner, fueling positive organizational development and high-performing cultures. Next up, we have with us Manish Mohan Mishra, who's Group Head, HR Transformation and Special Projects, Emirates National Oil Company, Dubai. A new HR ecosystem has to be conceptualized to respond to the opportunities created by IR 4.0 and future of work. Manish believes HR has an opportunity to be the architect of a new future in the VUCA and hierarchy world. Next up, we have with us Surit Chaudhary, Group Head of Organization Development and Culture at Al Ghurair Investment. Surit is the Group Head, Organization Development and Culture at the multi-country, multi-sector UAE-based conglomerate Al Ghurair Investment. Established in 1960, Al Ghurair is one of the largest diversified industrial enterprises in the Middle East, employing over 28,000 people in the region. And last but not the least, this session will be moderated by Vipul Mathur, Chief Business Officer, Talent Solutions People Strong, an experienced entrepreneur and a business leader with a career spanning over 2 decades in building, managing, and leading business functions for global enterprises. Vipul is a pioneer in the OKR space in Asia and has built an award-winning platform to help over 250,000 employees across 80 plus companies in Asia transition and manage OKRs encompassing different types of performance management techniques. So thank you so much for joining us today, Kunal, Manish, Surit, and Vipul. Looking forward to hearing some great insights from you today. I would now like to invite Vipul to take over and lead the discussion. So over to you, Vipul.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you so much for this introduction. And it's my privilege to host an amazing panel of business leaders. And I'm very confident in the next 30 minutes, I would learn a lot from the experiences from the leaders here. And needless to say, the audience will also feel the same. So to set up the context, on decoding the talent economy, I think we are in very interesting times. If you ask this question, what's rarer to find today, capital or talent? And I'm sure we'll all agree that talent is what's running the show today. And in the phase of talent economy today, talent is the differentiated currency. So I think one of the things which would be of a great interest to the audience is how do we actually crack the code and how do we build ourselves ready not just for today but for future. And the first and the foremost thing where every HR leader looks at is building the capability framework, right, for the firm, not just for today but for tomorrow, right? So on the capability framework design, I would love to hear your perspective and from your experiences that how do we acquire those new skills which are needed to win, and how do we build capability within teams at scale. The challenges perhaps you would have faced by taking this journey within your firms and in the categories you've seen, and how did you overcome those? I think that would be a great starting point for doing that. And I would love to start with you, Kunal, and then Manish, and then Surit, taking your perspectives on this.
Sure. Thank you, Vipul. So I have been associated with Choitrams for a little over 11 years now. And Choitrams used to be a very typical family managed business once upon a time. And the intent of initiating HR practices in a vintage organization was primarily that they wanted to move to a corporate image, right? And although it took a little bit of time, capability framework was one of the first things that we had thought. Now, when you work in a family organization, and let me start with the challenges associated to these particular activities, the understanding of HR, first of all, is very limited in many organizations, right? So we get into an organization and we start talking about things like capability framework, competency framework, and all those things. getting to a stage where we get to know that there is limitations of people understanding. So it is important that you first understand what's happening on the other side, right? And then it is also important to understand that capability framework is a larger circle. People create a competency framework and they think that they have created a capability framework within the organization, whereas these are two different things altogether, right? So in a nutshell, when we are talking about a capability versus competence perspective, to give a simple example to all our listeners, if I have a car license and I can drive a car, okay, my car license defines that I am capable enough to drive a car. But if I say that I am gonna drive or race a Formula One car, that's competence. So when you keep practicing a particular skill, okay, again and again, then it turns out to become a competence eventually, right? So I think, like I said, the biggest challenge was that I tried making people understand what capability framework is, and sometime, and this is very relevant in the current era, that we discuss the global perspectives. When the organization doesn't have an understanding of what HR can bring to table, how HR can help business become profitable, and maybe I would say after my initial failed attempts, I started at the very grassroots level. I had to get down on the floor, understand each job role within my organization, conduct a time and motion analysis within the company to evaluate how a job should be seen versus how it was actually conducted at that particular point in time. And even before the framework was developed, it was important to conduct an internal orientation for the board members, for business heads, to coach them on how capability is different from competence, right? And there are two perspectives I would have started with when I started off. Number one was to try and see how appropriately we can conduct a job analysis within the organization, which tells you what are the areas of the education levels, experience level that are required for a person to come in and be capable enough to do that job. When you're working in a vintage organization like Choithrams, if when I joined the company, rather, I spoke to a couple of business heads who were in the organization for like 35 years at that particular point in time. And my first question was, if I have to choose a head of X department, then what should be the experience level that I should put on the paper? And they're like, all right, 30 years. And I'm like, this is the concept. When we are talking about a job analysis, it is important to understand that we are talking about the job and not the person, right? So that job may require 15 years of experience, but our grassroots level thought processes are sometimes different, and those are the areas which we need to clear as HR people by conducting those orientations before we implement any kind of framework or put an idea on paper. So when you do the concept of job analysis, it eventually leads to variety of things leading to grading, and you exactly know what kind of talent you want, what experience level you want, what trainings should they have completed to be able to come in, okay, and then manage your work. Now, every organization is different for that matter, right? So somebody who's worked even within retail, let's say I'm from Choithrams, somebody would have been working in Landmark, somebody would have been working in Alshaya, another retail formats. When they come from an apparel industry or a luxury retail industry into food industry, I'm definitely hiring them because they are capable enough. Okay, so my framework tells me that his X person's experience can help my organization. So I would like to get that person in. However, when that person comes in and turns from a candidate to an employee, that person needs to keep practicing and honing his skills over here within the company. And this is where my competency framework comes into picture, right? And now in our organization, we do have a guide chart, a competency framework, which not only helps people for understanding what are the competencies. We have created a competency calculator. I'm sure there are different names for these particular things. We call it a competency calculator. It's in our HR application. And any new profile that gets added, all right, we put that profile, we look at the indicative activities. We have defined top 10 competencies for our organization. And by doing this exercise, by using this calculator, we identify which are the top 6 competencies that are required for any job description. And by doing this exercise, I mean, HR does not necessarily do it because we conduct orientations. We want line operations to do it. So our responsibility is to create an orientation, create an aura, create the tools for people to use it and then benefit out of it. And then from a larger, scheme of things, I think it helps people gain a better understanding of what they are expected to do. And that's how they meet their KPIs.
Very interesting perspective, Kunal. And I think the keyword for me, which I got from here, is internal orientation. I think it's very important for business to understand the science behind it, and that orientation needs to happen. Only then I think that's the build-up, which I think great insight, Kunal. Manish, I would love to hear your perspective. You've worked across sectors, you've advised a lot of firms, you've deployed frameworks across various organizations as well. So just wanted to understand your take on this.
So I would say that uh, we are at very interesting times. We are at a time where we have to look at the current and we have to also start to look at the future. Now, are we really saying today that everybody has moved to what we call as a digital business? The answer is no. We are transiting. So that's why I say it's a very, very interesting time. So while we have to keep the traditional going, we need to start to understand the future. And in fact, I would say that there is nothing called as future of work anymore. It is already now. Now, a couple of things which basically becomes important is we need to start to understand what does the future hold for us. Do we have a choice to become digital as an organization, as an entity? Do we need to adapt digital business models? The answer is we do not have a choice. For survival and for growth, every organization will have to move in that direction. And the moment we talk about becoming digital or adapting digital business models, the kind of capability and the skills that we are talking about completely shifts and changes. Now, so if we have to keep the current and the future perspective in view, I would essentially say that there are a couple of things that we need to keep in mind while designing our competency framework. Okay. And I'm not going to get into jargons of what is competency, capability, and skills and all. Let's take it that all of them combined together is what we are talking in the framework of competence. I think the first and the foremost thing that is going to happen and is happening already is that the jobs are going to change. They may be redesigned, new jobs will emerge. Certain aspects of the jobs, which is basically a component of set of tasks, will be automated, some will get augmented. So whatever is left out of what you call as the job to be done by humans, in that sense, you have to start to prepare a skill inventory for that. And when you're looking at a skill inventory, it has to be over a period of a couple of years. Because as jobs change, as technologies change, the skill inventory mapping or requirement is going to be one of the key things in defining your framework. Second thing that I see is that today, most of the organizations focus on what they call as employees for development. I think it's going to move to what will be called as your workforce, and it may or may not be your employees. Okay, today, many organizations do not train and develop their contingent workforce, let aside any partners or associates that you may have. So I think that's going to be a second important perspective for us to have. Third, I still see many competency frameworks being developed through workshops, etc., but they do not include anything to be close to what is called as digital skills. So you need to relook at your competency frameworks to have what is called as your human skills or the atomic power skills, as we call it today, the functional capabilities, but you need to incorporate digital skills. The proficiency levels, the requirements could be different, but you need to incorporate these. And I think one fundamental shift that will happen is in terms of the competence of the leaders themselves. So in creating your framework, essentially, these are some of the key aspects which you need to keep in mind. Thereafter, when we are looking at how we are going to implement or execute this framework, I think the model that would be required is going to be a hybrid model. You still will need physical and you need to transit to digital. So you will need learning platforms, capability development platforms. Now, for that, you need to create an ecosystem of partners. It could be your platform provider, it could be your technology provider, it could be your content provider. So the whole gamut has to be there. The second thing, which is also very, very important, is to look at the quality of content. Many of the content that exists today may be good for the current world, but they need to change to incorporate the needs of the future world. For example, many content around leadership focuses on today's model of leadership, but there are hardly contents available today on leadership which will talk about how to manage uncertainty. So content quality, content has to be a big focus area. And I think we need to also move away from just creating content to curating content, because several sources of content, free and paid, is available. I think another thing that needs to happen is today most organizations talk about providing training and development based on what we call as the training need analysis. So what is needed for the job is what you get trained on. I think this concept is going to die. We need to start to focus on what we need in the job today and future. Definitely, you need to train and develop your resources on that. But at the same time, it has to move to what the employee wants, because that's going to be a key factor for retention, engagement, and growth of employees. And then, of course, how do you train, how do you develop your people is going to be another perspective. It has to be anytime, anywhere, the way I want it, in whichever formats I want it. So I guess these are going to be some of the critical things to be looked at. Certain segmentation in terms of bite size. So you could have development programs which could be more around on the go. You could have certifications. You could have open content formats that could be there. It could be a seminar or a conference like this. I think another thing which you need to look at is you need to start to recognize badging, just as opposed to just degrees. You need to celebrate these achievements through the badging that is happening. And of course, you also need to create a culture where when you are acquiring skills or developing yourself, I would say you need to pay a premium for acquiring and developing critical skills. So I would say that my capability framework needs to cover and encompass all of these. Are these easy to implement and put in place? No. I think the challenge starts is convincing the leadership teams about the future. They say, why do you want to put in a digital skill? Even the employees are not ready today to go for digital skills if you talk about. So I think it's about creating an awareness. And I think all of these have to be plugged together. It is a journey. It's a journey of persuasion. It's a journey that you have to be convinced and move around. And I think that's the way you need to move forward to create a well-defined learning framework for the future.
Awesome, Manish. I think, I was just taking the notes and my page is now almost full on this. But the very interesting piece and what hit me is that future is today. Right. I think a couple of years we were talking about future. Future is today. I think the jobs are changing. I think that's the first and the foremost building block. Like job has changed, right? And it has already changed. It's not changing. It's changed. So do you have those skills for this change job? I think that's a very interesting perspective. And most importantly, like, and it's a mirror also. And also you're saying from a challenge standpoint, and what Kunal also mentioned, that internal orientation is very critical. And I think we need to make sure that the leaders understands the criticality of this and build the entire journey or a roadmap around this. So, great perspective, Manish. Surit, I think, I'd love to hear from you. You've deployed this, you've consulted, advised a lot of firms as well, and you've implemented as well. So from a practitioner's lens, what's your take on this, Surit?
Well, I mean, going in third, most of the great points have already been taken, but sharing some bits, from what's working for us currently and how I've seen it in the past. I think the starting point here, and which Manish as well referred to and Kunal referred to as well, is the internal context. So start with the organization that we wish to create, not today, but for the future. So what is the organization that we are trying to drive for the future? So that drives all discussions around capability, competence, learning, whatever we call it. It's essentially being future ready. So the 101 is to start off with the strategy that we're trying to drive. What is the organization trying to create? If any of the interventions, and we were having a quick discussion earlier about CEO and CHRO, I mean, if we don't start off with the strategy and game in mind, the battle's pretty much lost. So that is definitely something that we have to build in when we create competence frameworks, capability frameworks, skills matrices, whatever we call it. Second, a strategy does not work well if we don't align it to or give it the flavor of the organization. And I'm starting to use that term a little bit. The culture is the flavor of the organization. You would have a vanilla ice cream in 50 different places, but what makes vanilla ice cream in a particular shop unique is the kind of the way or the special ingredient, and culture is that special ingredient. And it is not something that goes alongside strategy. It is something which puts a rocket booster onto strategy because it helps deliver it a lot more. So one, have the end goal in mind from what is it that we would want to drive in the organization as our strategy. Second, give it that that rocket booster of the organization culture and put it into that context. So we need to understand what is it that we are driving towards and how does it work in my way of doing things, in the organization's way of doing things. And a critical aspect here is, and I would probably take it a step ahead in terms of what that competence framework or what that capability framework is, and Manish should refer to it. It's about managing ambiguity and the uncertainty that's all around us, and it will be ever present in jobs in the future. If we think that we can teach somebody things which they will use 3 years from now, we are mistaken. We need to have a sense of hyper personalization, but at the same time have it extremely agile so that we give people the tools and the equipment to go out and acquire knowledge. Knowledge is now omnipresent. It is not something which is the right of a few. It is something which is available to anyone and everyone. It is about the traits, it's about the characteristics, it's about the behaviors that we inculcate in people, which nudges them and pushes them to go out and get that information, right? And that's what again, I mean, that's what differentiates a good performer from a great performer, a good organization from a great organization. So how is it that we are creating an organization culture which is focused towards continuous learning, which is focused towards hyper personalization? Because what works for me as a learning style may not work for Kunal, may not work for Manish. So it has to be hyper personalized, and it needs to drive the organization strategy that we are going to create. And in this context, the center point here is the person or the people or the employee, whatever we call it. I don't like calling people employees, but people. I mean, and we are from the 19th century when people used to look for work, to 20th century where people used to look for jobs, to the 21st century where people used to look for careers. Currently, it's about people looking for experiences. I wish to join an organization because I'm guaranteed a certain experience out of it. The experience is, again, relevant to what I think the organization is willing to offer as a value proposition. It could be learning, it could be money, it could be growth, it could be experience, could be travel, could be free fuel. So could be any of it. So that's what we again need to look at, is to how are we aligning what people want versus what people are giving with the competence or the capability that we need at work. And again, probably mentioned in 50,000 panels across the globe, jobs are changing, roles are changing, careers are changing, and gigs are here to stay. Will it replace an organization and a full-time employee? If you ask me for my opinion, I don't think in the next 20 to 30 years, and I think that's about a good enough time horizon for us to kind of look at as of now. They will not replace jobs fully, but they will form a substantial part of what people will do. And as we start to have a diversified workforce, we really don't need to be in Dubai or in India or in US or UK. It's a global talent market. So if it's a global talent market, how do we kind of create a pool which decides on what is the skill we want for in the organization? Where is the skill available globally? Who's the best person to do it faster, quicker, cheaper? ensure that we're giving that person the right experience, giving them the right experience in that process while they're doing it, so they're engaged and performing well, and it's delivering the organization strategy. So I've probably weaved a kind of a little complex web here, but I mean, to summarize, if it's not aligned to strategy, not aligned to the culture, not aligned to the person, we are pretty much failing. I mean, and we can create the best of competency frameworks with the best of scales and the best of assessment methodologies, but that really wouldn't get us nowhere. It'll still keep the HR team busy, but I'm sure it wouldn't lead to organizational results.
Amazing perspective. And so I love the way you said the strategy end game. I think it's important to visualize the entire end game, and it's important to show it from the lens to business that this is how we're going to progress. You also touched upon that, we need to broaden out the entire vision. Today, talent is very global. Identify the pools of excellence where they reside, and change your approach. The third thing, you also spoke about the agility, right? And the context, and your context is your organization culture, what the way we work. So empower people to gain, build capabilities, not restrict them in a very prescriptive manner, but give them everything possible. And the most important piece is something which you spoke about, the experience. Now, how are you giving the entire experience? And one thing which caught my attention was the free fuel. So if that's part of the experience, I'm all game for that. But just to bring
Manish can help us.
Manish, yes, there's definitely Manish can advise us on that. So in fact, the experience word is very critical component, and we've kind of double clicked a very technical start of a capability design. The second very important element comes the experience part of it, and I'll pick up the cue from you, sir, that today, from your perspective, and so we'll start from you so that you get, your perspective first upfront. The entire talent management and the future of work and the way the employee experience is being built, what is the impact which you are seeing over here, specifically when we are designing career journeys, learning journeys for people, and that's the experience layer which is residing on top of the core of the capability framework. So just wanted to seek your perspective. How are you seeing that happening, and what is the advice you would give to the audience that they can create a superlative experience on top of the capability framework?
That's a great question, and I think the way to create an experience framework is not to have an experience framework. We shouldn't be bucketing it into PowerPoint presentations and Word documents that this is the experience that we're willing to offer. Again, at the cost of repeating, hyper personalization, ability to measure what experience really means. Experience is very different for myself versus Kunal versus Manish versus Vipul. So how is it that we are measuring it on an ongoing basis? How are we empowering people, and especially line managers? And I think one critical piece we tend to forget, I tend to forget, and my CHR kind of keeps mentioning is the line manager is the HR manager, right? It's if I'm a people manager, I am somebody who needs to know what is the experience that works for my team, and need to deliver experiences accordingly. So I think the framework bucketing it is not right, but ability to provide an infrastructure where we can measure it and where we can provide tools to line managers and people themselves to get what they really like and what really drives them and what really motivates and pushes them to go the extra mile. So I think those would be the key pieces from my side.
Got it. So you're saying that the accountability resides with the manager from an experience, standpoint for a team member, and we need to empower them with the right tools, and the yardstick to measure the experience, so that they drive that entire agenda for it. No, great perspective. Kunal, just wanted to hear your views on this as well. What's your take in terms of building these experiences within the firms?
I think I second Suri. Sometimes you don't have to overdo things in life, and although it is important that we create a framework within the organization, I think coaching is more important rather than establishing frameworks that people may not necessarily understand. Right? The whole alignment within the business comes in when HR understands business first, right? And then tries and inculcates what they want to do within the organization, whether it is a capability framework or a talent management principle that they want to incorporate within the organization. I think people relate to you more when they understand that you are trying to understand them, right? And it's very simple phenomena. It's a give and take relationship. If an organization next door has an amazing policy, it may not necessarily work for me, right? So there's no point replicating what the world is doing. What is important is that we understand our culture, rightly mentioned by Surit some time back. It is the flavor. So if you assess and understand what culture works in your organization and what is the flavor of your organization, you will implement practices that are more relevant to your organization rather than doing it just because a textbook asks you to do it. So I think keeping it simple is more important, but coaching, mentoring, and getting reversely mentored is again a very important thing. When we as HR people go and try and train people on perspectives that we want to implement within the organization, there's a lot of feedback that comes back to us, and it is important we hear them. It is important that we assess what people want, in the organization, and then try and tweak our practices in a way which support our culture, support our environment within the organization, and that's where you at least can try and create a healthy balance.
Got it, Kunal. Got it. I think a very interesting perspective, to deploy a better superlative experience of coaching is one. Again, it brings up from what Surit said, that accountability resides with the manager to provide that experience, and whatever it takes to empower them is what we need to do. And the second thing you also mentioned is that don't ape or just pick up from anybody else. Invest in what's unique to you, your firm, your culture. Identify that, and that's what's going to give a superlative experience to team members. Manish, just wanted to hear your views on this as well.
I agree with both Shurid and Kunal when they say that somewhere when we talk about experience, it's probably too much as a buzzword today. Okay. I think, but we have to also look at it in a different way. For example, Netflix. You expect Netflix to be providing you services in XYZ way. So that's called the way of life. To me, experiences are nothing, but these are the way of life, the way of doing things. And that basically stems up from your culture. I think you mentioned about journey. So as a part of talent, of course, you have to have these journeys. It has to be a way of life. It has to happen, and it has to be seamless. Unfortunately, today we do not provide a seamless experience probably. That's why we talk about creating experiences. So while we need to create it as a way of life, today there is a need to define it. And we need to define it in the form of journeys, as you rightly said. Every journey has multiple touch points. You have moments that matter. And I would say it is not moments that matter. It is every moment matters. Okay. The organizations have to also enable it. The organizations have to create a culture around it. Now, when we talk about experiences, what is it that today everybody expects? And more so post-COVID. Everybody wants an Amazon experience for everything. Everybody wants a Netflix. Everybody wants a YouTube or a Google. You search and you get it. So talent also as a function will have to move into that same zone. That's why they talk about hyper personalization. So whether you segment your talent, whether you create personas around it, or you move your processes to experiences where every touch point and every moment matters, it has to move from a lot of things which we do on an annual basis to a continuous basis in the flow of work. So it is happening and you don't bother. You have to move from lag to creating on a real-time basis. You have to move from an silo base to more of an integrated approach. So instead of talking about saying, hey, this is the responsibility of the recruitment team and this is not the responsibility of the L&D team, I think we need to focus on, hey, the ultimate objective is we need a skilled workforce. We need to move in that direction. And of course, these all require data, they require insights. And I think sum total is that we need to create it. Moving forward, hopefully, we will have these experiences built in as like your internet connection at the background, which you don't even bother.
Got it. Very, very interesting piece you mentioned, Manish, over here. And I think I'll break it down. First of all, for firms, is to define experience. What does experience mean to you? Very unique to you. You define that, get a clarity. And every touch point matters, right? Irrespective of anything. Very interesting word you said. It's from mindset shift from process to experience. I think let's not let be a process as a checklist activity. What is an experience we are providing, irrespective of whatever the touch point would be, is something which is more of a mindset shift, most importantly, and differentiate between a lead and a lag, which is super critical. And a very interesting piece which you spoke, which is actually will give us a continuation to our next question, where you said that instead of a siloed approach, you need to look at more integrated approach, because at the end of the day, as practitioners, you would want to see data and bring data on the table and then build your strategies to define that experience or that capability. But a lot of time we struggle with just getting data on board. So the next question, in fact, is around the importance of an integrated talent management system, and we at People Strong, being the execution engine and enablers to leaders like you, in fact, looked this from a very different lens, and we created an operating system which we call it a talent OS, because we believe that talent management from a process, what you said, has to shift to an experience, and for that you need to have an operating system in place, and you need to upgrade the talent continuously. This becomes your core nerve center, your operating system for your firm. So from your perspective, and I'll start with Kunal and then to you, Surit, and then to you, Manish, is how critical today it is to look at an integrated talent operating system as a business imperative, not just as a process or a workflow imperative. So Kunal, your take on this.
Vipul, look, I think communication is very essential, right? And till now, we have spoken about communication amongst people. And now, when we rely on systems so much in today's time, even systems need to communicate appropriately with people within the organization. So, communication, I think, is the key for business success. And the absence of clear and concise communication between teams, between systems and teams leads to inefficiencies and redundancies, more importantly. And the further issue is that the fact is that the teams are given next to no incentive to communicate with one another in today's time, right? So I think when you have a great integrated talent management system, it basically should have a couple of features. Number one, since we are talking about silos, it should break down talent management silos in itself, and the introduction, should lead to smooth flow of information within the organization. And although I think while silos provide structure and some organization, they tend to cause more problems over a long term. So intentionally withholding information from other employees also will lead to inefficiency as well as unhappiness within the organization. So some managers feel that employees should be kept on a need to know basis, and such an approach generally destroys initiative and stifles creativity within the companies. I think employees can be thought of as moving parts with a machine that contribute to be smooth and efficient operation for the larger apparatus. And in order for an organization to be profitable, all of its components, departments need to work together in harmony. So this should be one feature that integrated talent management system should provide. The second job I can think of is it should create alignment for all parties. And because an integrated talent management system would work by ensuring that employees within the organization respond positively to the organization's mission and vision. And finally, I think trying to ensure a consistent HR management should be one of the core features of an integrated talent management system, because anyone can attest to the evaluation of an employee's key performance is one of the most important processes in talent management. And the information gathered from, let's say, performance reviews can be used to gauge an employee's development and identify potential targets for improvement within the organization as well, right? So I think these are the top three elements that come to my mind. when I think of having a strong integrated talent management system.
Got it. Got it. And the keyword which I got apart from communication uh, is break the silos. I think it's important to do that. It just brings a lot of inefficiencies in the system across. And needless to say, it kind of connects back to the previous line also, which is around building that experience. Because when I get a holistic view, so what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, completely agree with Kunal there, and Vipul, some of the elements which you mentioned. I mean, there is no question that systems cannot be integrated. They have to be integrated. And as Manish said, if you want to give people an Amazon experience and a Netflix experience and that immediate gratification of needs, if the systems aren't integrated, we wouldn't be able to provide that. So similarly, an organization which is on a growth path, it needs data on demand, needs data on demand to make bespoke decisions. And again, if we are trying to drive hyper personalization, it cannot be happening with data coming in from 50 silos, then getting integrated, and then somebody working on an Excel sheet overnight and generating a report somewhere else. So unless and until we have an integrated view which takes into account every aspect of a person's journey in the organization, as Manish mentioned, what are these touch points? Where is it that we are getting these data points? And I mean, next step of it would be, how do we kind of capture data even from things like biometrics, things like devices which we wear, so to really look at an integrated view of what that person is going through. We are trying to look at emotions through surveys and things like that, but how is the person physically responding to it? How are we driving elements of well-being into the overall picture of the person? So again, it's not a career that we're offering, it's that experience we are offering, and well-being is a very important part of that piece in it. So for all of that, yes, an integrated system is a no-brainer. It's not even a question anymore. It's a reality of an organization. If an organization doesn't have that, they really need to think long and hard in terms of their ability to kind of be competitive in the future. So that's, and what Manish had said earlier, it's not something of the future. It's something that's there today. We really need to kind of make it work immediately and make it happen. And yes, from a HR system perspective, things like talent and framework is pretty much toothless if we don't have elements, simple elements of performance. And even if we do integrate performance, if we don't have the right elements of data around the person themselves, which also is looking at his or her experience, I may have a great performing employee who fits in all the right talent boxes and fits in the top of the box and fits the talent criteria, but is extremely disengaged and is looking for a job or has health issues. So how would we take a decision again in silos? So an integrated view is what it's the hygiene factor. It's not even a good to have anymore.
Couldn't agree more. So, and I, what you are saying over here is that it's like it's not a desire, it's the need right now. It's like a business imperative. We should have it. Otherwise, rest everything else is just jargons and the talks we'll have until unless we're gonna impact that with data and utilize that data. Manish, your take on this.
So the moment you talk about operating systems coming with an OD and transformation background, I go agile and charged up. So I think, Vipul, you mentioned a very important point saying it's a need. So I think we have to understand here, businesses are under tremendous pressure. Okay, we are talking about on one side transformation, rebooting, reimagining, transforming. Everything is happening on the business front. You have to go to new geographies, new product. The time you get new products out has to be quick and fast. Okay, the whole consumer behavior is all about instant, easy, seamless. That's what we are all talking about. Now, if businesses have to become that, then I think the talent function has to deliver so that the businesses can arrive at those results exactly in the same way. So to me, definitely, while there is a need for a new talent operating model, okay, is it just going to happen? I guess no. It has to be a conscious and a very, very focused effort. It is not going to happen in 1 or 2 days. I would say to create a mature talent operating system may take you anything between 5 to 7 to 10 years time frame itself. You need to break down and create new work architectures, which will break your hierarchies, boundaries, and silo structures to hierarchies, as I called it, and network of communities. You need to reinvent your jobs. You need to start to look at new ways of working, from departments and functions to cross-functional teams to project-based teams. Of course, we have moved quite a bit in terms of the hybrid working. The tools with which we work are absolutely changing. We talked about from processes to experiences. Kunal touched upon technology as an enabler. So absolutely, from technology, which is save, delete, and edit, we need to move to technologies which are more engaging, collaborating, and communicating. And we did start the whole discussion at a fundamental level, talking about the skill being the core of everything that we do. So I think definitely all these components form your new talent operating model. Now, how do you implement it? How do you make it a reality? I think it's very simple in a way. We need to adapt the same approach as what the business does. So look at an asset management. So looking at, rather than just as a capital asset, you have to start to look at as a skill asset. Okay, you need to know, is your asset proper? Is your asset being utilized properly? Is your asset giving you the returns? You need to keep re-looking at your skills and everything that you get out of skills. And the second thing that you need to look at, it is also very relevant as we talk about the supply chain problem across the globe with the chips and the semiconductors issue around the world. We are facing music in almost every industry. Same thing applies in terms of your talent management. So we need to move to a supply chain concept. You have to have your partners of ecosystem. You need to start to work on the basis of demand and supply. There are multiple touch points. The more rare the skills that you have, the more demand and the more premium you will pay. You have to ensure that you maintain your inventory or your skill inventory at a right level. You have to optimize them. You have to keep growing them. So to me, the new talent operating model will automatically start to break away the silos and move exactly in the same fashion as the businesses are, where you need to create instant, easy, and seamless integrations. While this is a nice concept, practically there is a huge challenge and a problem which needs to be undertaken consciously. The mindsets, the culture, and the leadership has to change along with it. And this has to be a focused effort in next 3 to 5 years to 10 years to reach a mature stage. And it definitely is required for organizations to survive and grow.
Got it, Manish. Got it. No, I think amazing take, and I like what you mentioned that today businesses are under pressure, and the time to market is the very important component. How fast can you market yourself before the competition? And you need that agility, and the talent management function needs to kind of drive that agenda very clearly. And also, what you said about is the mindset change, and I think that's a very integral component that within the organization we need to drive that. I think a very interesting piece. I think we started with the building capability framework, then we looked at experiences, and then we looked at from a practitioner's lens how critical it is to build a integrated, talent management system and an operating system. But there are a lot of budding HR leaders also in this audience, right? And they are also looking at what is that they should be doing as HR professionals to be prepared better for the talent economy area. So what is a very specific stop, start, and a continue advice you would give to them as budding HR leaders, what they should be prepared with? And Manish, I'll start this with you for this question.
So I would say first, know the future. Start to visualize the future much beyond what you see. You need to challenge everything around you, reboot, reimagine. You need to continuously build skills and capabilities. And I would say you need to start to focus on relational workforce experiences. I think these are the couple of takeaways which I would have. My views are actually published on this in the Forbes magazine last month. You could visit forbes.com to see my views on that.
Definitely, Manish, amazing. So one is reimagine, relook, and build relationships. I think that's critical. So, your perspective, start, stop, continue advice.
Um, I think I love to give food examples. I'm a foodie myself, so I think stay hungry for any future professional. I think that's both the continue, start, and stop thinking that you know it all. Again, as Satya Nadella had said, that every organization and every person needs to transition from a know-it-all to a learn-it-all. So stay hungry for knowledge. Always have that view about yourself that none of us know enough, and always kind of continuing the learning process throughout. We can never know enough, and this is one key differentiator between average people versus great people. I may have learned tons of things in my MBA and as I've worked over the years, but move in and walk into any conversation with a very open mind to learn something out of it and to absorb something out of it. So I think that's my 2 cents on it.
No, amazing. Stay hungry always. It's the success mantra. Kunal, what's your take?
Well, I would just say in simple terms, understand business. There are many theories that claim that HR is dying, and maybe it's true. But what it means is that HR needs to move beyond the transactional element and ensure interventions are planned, keeping business objectives as top priority. If your people function requires amendments, try and review the circumstances associated to maybe financial planning, qualitative leadership, and branding. And branding is such an amazing thing, right? If anybody told you that branding is marketing department's job, then they were wrong. And if you believe them, then you need to look into right places. I think branding is everyone's job. We make our organization, and each view in the organization matters.
Great, Kunal. I think my headline is HR is business. So I think that's what I take. On that note, one last, I'm very, because it takes a lot of time to get all of you together at this place. One last question, if Sakshi permits, Yasmin permits me to ask you, is when we say HR is business, are you seeing more CHROs becoming CEOs? Manish, one line, sorry, just one line, Kunal.
Absolutely, yes.
The lines are blurred. So CHRO, CEO, they're all in the same role. So absolutely agree.
I think that's true. It can happen, and it has started to happen. More importantly, CHROs, when they are embedded deeply into the business over a time, they become naturally adept, at the skills that a CEO requires. Considering the fact that they rally around people and causes of people within the organization a lot. So I think, given the understanding of business, the journey has already begun. Let me put it this way.
Great, awesome. So we have our career journeys already marked there. So great. Thank you so much, Kunal, Surit, Manish. It was a pleasure interacting with you as always and sharing some amazing insights. And thank you, team ET, for organizing this. And Yasmin, over to you. And thank you for providing this platform to all of us.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all our leaders who joined us for this very, very engaging and exciting discussion. There was so much to learn from each one of you today. So thank you, Manish, Kunal, Surid, and thank you, Vipul. You moderated it really, really well. Yes, indeed, HR is business now. So let's reimagine, reset, reboot, and stay hungry for a better future. So thank you so much. That concludes this session, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Coming up next is a keynote on building the future of work ecosystem with Web 3.0 and Metaverse by Soumyasanto Sen, digital strategy and transformation experts. So see you all there, and thank you once again.